Mercedes Moné has fans talking, especially WWE fans, after giving a recent take about her former employer. In today's video, we are going to be talking about this because it's a very interesting anytime that Mercedes Moné talks about WWE. It always gets controversial, whether or not she's being negative about the company or even positive about the company. It's just the way that the world works. Now, you could say it's because it's Mercedes Moné, who is one of the more controversial stars out there, just based off of fan feedback and the way that she carries herself, or it's because there's tribalism because you can't be a WWE fan and an AEW fan. If you're an AEW fan, you must hate WWE and vice versa, and I don't understand that. Regardless, anytime that Mercedes Moné brings up WWE, fans talk, and there's even fans to this day that will go and comment on Monet's social media activity, talking about how, oh, you need to leave AEW and go back to WWE. You were much better in WWE. Basically, anything revolving WWE is pro, and anything that is AEW is a negative, which is a weird ideology, but hey, that's where we are in 2025. Now, Mercedes Moné has spoken highly of her WWE tenure. She's also been very honest and open and direct about her WWE tenure as well. Now, obviously, it ended after a very successful career. She main evented WrestleMania, had several high profile matches, won multiple championships, and had legendary feuds. She also changed the course of women's wrestling with her matches in NXT and on the main roster, and working with several others. Now, Monet did an interview where she spoke about WWE. She spoke about her days in NXT and how women's wrestling changed there. She did so on the Marking Out podcast, which MVP hosts. She said, I feel like once Triple H came down to NXT and switched it, and Dusty Rhodes really had so much passion for his students that he was teaching. I love Dusty Rhodes and William Regal. I feel like those were the three that were just like, you know what, let's give the women an opportunity to show that they can shine. And the first ever women's match that I saw at NXT was Paige and Emma, and they had a 20-minute match. And I was like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like that. I want that. I have a drive for this. And then eventually, I just kept going and going and going until I had the Fatal 4-Way match with Charlotte, Becky, and Bayley, and fans said that we stole the show. Then we had the greatest match then, and then I became NXT Women's Champion. I had that match with Bayley at the Barclays, and I felt like after that match, women's wrestling kind of just elevated and changed. So a few different things. Yes, NXT changed the course of women's wrestling. Even though TNA had your Gail Kims, your Awesome Collins, your ODBs, and others, and they were on the forefront of it, they were the pioneers of it, they didn't put it in the spotlight that WWE did in terms of changing women's wrestling. Paige and Emma, obviously one of the pioneers to do so. In regards to the hot take, talking about her match with Bayley at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn at the Barclays, that changing wrestling, is that true? Yes, it is. You have to agree with that based off of where WWE was. Vince McMahon was there. He saw the match. It changed his viewpoint of what women's wrestling could look like. And once you show it to him, then if he got on board with it, then it was going to change forever, right? And there had been slow movements already, right? Around this time, WWE revamped everything. They revamped the women's division, and they started, quote unquote, giving divas a chance and all that other stuff. There was rumblings, there was movements online and within the fan base, and obviously AJ Lee calling out the roster and all these things, and the whole give divas a chance. There was rumblings, there was frustration. Like, anytime you see change, it doesn't just happen overnight usually, right? There's a usual slow burn, a slow build to whatever you're changing. And it's no different with women's wrestling, right? Because we've heard stories from countless wrestlers talking about how, back in the day, women's wrestlers, they couldn't work like the men. They didn't have the same amount of time. They couldn't throw punches. They had to do forearm shots. They couldn't work like the guys. They had to work like, quote unquote, divas. And there's been a lot of, back and forth on WWE's handling of that. Chelsea Green, she defends the WWE Divas term. She doesn't look at it as a negative. She looks at it as a positive that she wanted to be a diva. I think it just comes down to, personal preference. Me, personally, I just say, and what they do now is just call them all superstars. That's what they are. If you want to use the superstars terminology, which WWE has for, 30 years, if not longer, at 40, I guess, then just do that, right? Like, let's not separate. Let's not do all this. So I'm cool with it. Just go with superstars. But Mercedes Moné and Bailey and Charlotte and Becky and Paige and Emma and AJ Lee and all of these stars, including and people will give me flack on this, but the Bella Twins, they were part of the change where, hey, these these talents either are super talented in the ring and have a different offering, or they have the ability to connect with the fans just like the men do. And if you have a connection with the fan base, I don't care if you're a bad promo, I don't care if you have a bad match, as long as you can get emotion out of fans and they want to see you and they support you or they boo you, that's all that I need to know, right? Because I would say most people would say that, okay, Hulk Hogan wasn't the greatest in-ring performer in the world, but he had a connection with the fans, and he is the biggest star of all time, right? Um, all of these things change. Simple case in point, Steve Austin, when he broke his neck, he was still out of action, but they kept him on television because fans wanted to see him. So you have to do that. It's no different with Mercedes Moné. Okay, she left WWE, but she had such a following that fans followed her to New Japan. They followed her to AEW, and they still want to see her back in WWE. It's because of star power, right? And with women, it's like if you have stars, use them, right? Charlotte Flair has talked about how the only reason that the WrestleMania 35 2019 main event with Charlotte Flair, Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch is because Ronda was the star, right? She credits Ronda for being the sole purpose behind them even headlining that show. It's all about star power. The day and age back in the day where the idea of women headlining a WrestleMania or headlining a Monday Night Raw or headlining the PLE was just absolutely unheard of. It was almost goofy, right? Like it just didn't make a lot of sense. Yet they did it because why? Because you had pioneers that would go in there and change the course of history. So I 100% agree with Mercedes Moné. Let me know down in the comments area below, do you agree with Mercedes Moné? That is the true question.